Hello and welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Gabriel the Bibi Capaldi and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please do check down below that you are subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free and helps us pop up on your feed a bit more often.
Where am I?
Said Trari, after waking up in the middle of a cultural exchange visit to Earth where he had fainted reading a cookbook. The world around him gradually came into focus. He was reclined on what humans called a beanbag chair, an oddly malleable piece of furniture that conformed to his body in a way that was surprisingly comfortable. The tent he found himself in was quiet, contrasting to the bustling sounds filtering through the fabric walls from outside. The muffled crowd noise from the cultural exchange venue continued unabated. Hundreds of voices speaking dozens of languages, the occasional beep of translation devices, and most distinctly, human laughter. The sound was unmistakable. In the 3 Earth days since their arrival, Trari had become intimately familiar with human laughter. It was loud, explosive, and came in countless variations, from soft, breathy chuckles to full-bodied bellows that seemed to use their entire respiratory system. Now, he could pick it out from a crowd of sounds, like a beacon cutting through cosmic noise. Along with laughter came the mingling aromas of the event, the floral scent of human cleaning products, the earthy smell of the grounds, and most prominently, the bewildering array of food odors that seemed omnipresent on this strange world. The tent flap parted with a soft rustle, and Lucas Hernandez stepped inside. The human was tall even by his species' standards, with dark hair cropped close to his scalp and skin the same brown color of the rich soil samples they had analyzed yesterday. His face bore what Trari had learned was called a 5 o'clock shadow, a curious term for the darkening around the lower portion of the face that indicated hair growth. Lucas wore the bluish jumpsuit designated for human cultural liaisons, with the Earth Galactic exchange insignia emblazoned across his chest. As soon as Lucas's eyes, deep brown and forward-facing like all predators, met Trari's, his expression softened. The human's face was remarkably expressive, another trait Trari had observed, muscles pulling in complex patterns to signal emotions that would take a Hyzak a full body posture to communicate. "Oh, thank goodness, you're awake," Lucas said, his voice pitched low with what Trari recognized as relief. "You gave us quite a scare there." Lucas crossed the small space and carefully sat on a folding chair next to the beanbag. "You wouldn't believe the chaos you caused when you just, dropped like that, right in the middle of the orientation session. The poor publishing team who made the cultural training handbook nearly fainted." He chuckled softly. "They kept asking if they'd accidentally included something about warfare in the food section. They were terrified they'd triggered something in your species' pacifist psychology." As Lucas spoke, Trari became increasingly aware of his own body. He attempted to push himself upright, his 3-fingered hands sinking deeper into the beanbag than expected. The movement drew his attention to his own form, leaner than the stocky human sitting beside him. His green skin, mottled with characteristic black spots, caught the light beams coming through the tent's fabric. Unlike humans, whose skin seemed to repel everything but damage, Hyzak's skin was soft and slightly permeable, allowing for supplementary respiration and hydration in their homeworld's humid atmosphere. He blinked his large, round-shaped eyes, which were positioned on the sides of his elongated head, the mark of prey species throughout the galaxy. Evolution had granted his ancestors near-panoramic vision, the better to spot predators on the open plains of Hyzakia. It made maintaining eye contact with humans, or any predator species with forward-facing eyes, somewhat uncomfortable, requiring him to turn his head slightly to focus one eye directly on his conversation partner.
"I apologize for the incident,"
Trari managed, his translator chip converting his native sibilant speech into standard human English with only the slightest delay. With considerable effort, he finally extracted himself from the beanbag's clutches and carefully rose to his feet. Standing at about 5 feet tall, he was considerably shorter than Lucas. Looking around, he now noticed the tent contained a stretcher and various pieces of medical equipment with human writing on them, presumably emergency instruments brought in during his collapse. His formal scientific robe, the deep purple color denoting his specialization in xenobiology, had become wrinkled. He brushed at it ineffectually with his slender fingers.
I presume the rest of the scientific team branded me too soft and asked you to bring me here?
He tried to keep the bitterness from his voice, but his translator chip wasn't sophisticated enough to mask emotional undertones. Lucas's eyes darted away momentarily. Something like that, he said vaguely, busying himself with adjusting a nearby monitor that didn't appear to need adjusting. Trari's mind whirred as he tried to recall the exact circumstances of his collapse. What had been in that cultural handbook? He had been reading about the various food humans would be showcasing during the event when... The memory struck him like a meteor. It was a fish dish from an island nation, a species humans called pufferfish. The text casually mentioned that it contained a neurotoxin called tetrodotoxin, a compound deadly even to humans. Yet this potentially lethal food was scheduled to be present in the cultural exchange under the exotic foods category. Trari felt his heart analog organs begin to race again as the horror of the realization returned. These humans didn't just consume potentially deadly substances. They were proudly displaying this behavior, as if it were some kind of achievement to be shared with galactic visitors. As if they got some twisted pleasure from demonstrating their species' apparent death wish to the rest of the cosmos.
Lucas,
Trari began, his voice pitched higher than usual.
How can your species possibly justify consuming a food that contains a neurotoxin capable of killing you? And not just consuming it, but presenting it as a cultural achievement to interstellar visitors.
Lucas looked puzzled. What are you talking about?
The fish. The one with enough poison to kill 20 adult humans.
Trari gestured emphatically, his thin arms cutting through the air.
It was right there in your cultural handbook, as if it were perfectly normal to consume toxins for pleasure.
Realization slowly dawned on Lucas's face. Oh, you mean fugu, the pufferfish? He held up a finger. Hang on, let me grab that handbook. Lucas ducked out of the tent, leaving Trari standing there, his breathing still rapid. A moment later, the human returned, flipping through a glossy book emblazoned with the Earth Galactic Exchange logo. Here it is, Lucas said, turning the book around. The page displayed a beautifully plated dish of paper-thin white slices arranged in a floral pattern. The caption read, Fugu, pufferfish, Japan's infamous culinary delicacy requiring specially licensed chefs.
See?
Trari pointed at the text.
Infamous, requiring special licenses because it can kill you.
Lucas shrugged, as if it were the most normal thing in the universe. There's nothing wrong with it when prepared properly. I had it once during a trip to Japan. The chefs who prepare it train for years, and they know exactly which parts to remove so the amount of toxin left isn't enough to kill. Just enough to give a little tingle on your tongue. Noting Trari's expression of horror, he quickly added, But in a good way. It's about the experience, the skill involved, the culinary adventure. Trari stared at Lucas, utterly dumbfounded. The casual way the humans discussed deliberately ingesting neurotoxins for the experience confirmed everything he had suspected. Humans weren't merely omnivores, they were culinary daredevils with no survival instinct whatsoever. In that moment, a steely determination formed in Trari's mind. He would rejoin the rest of the multi-species team and prove to them that humans were, in fact, dangerously unbalanced. It wasn't that he was too soft, as they had apparently suggested. It was that humans were objectively, demonstrably insane.
I wish to return to the group,
Trari announced firmly. Lucas looked relieved. Great. Feeling better then? The event's in full swing now, and there's a lot to see. Outside the medical tent, the full spectacle of the Earth Galactic Exchange unfolded before them. The sprawling venue had been constructed specifically for this historic first cultural exchange, with dozens of pavilions representing Earth's nations and cultural regions. Floating signs in multiple languages guided visitors through areas dedicated to art, science, history, and, most terrifyingly, Tutrari cuisine. They navigated through crowds of humans and the handful of other galactic visitors. Trari noticed humans stopping to stare at the galactic delegations with expressions ranging from wonder to concealed fear. Their journey took them past food stalls emitting a bewildering array of aromas, some pleasantly herbal, others distressingly meaty, and some that defied categorization entirely.
"What is that?"
Trari asked, pointing to a booth where a human was handling what appeared to be smoldering logs. "That's a barbecue demonstration," Lucas explained. "They're smoking meats, slow cooking it over a wood fire."
"You cook your food using fire? Actual combustion?"
Trari couldn't keep the alarm from his voice. On Hyzakia, open flame had been phased out thousands of years ago due to safety concerns. Lucas laughed. "Of course! Humans have been cooking with fire for hundreds of thousands of years. It's part of what made us human in the first place." Trari filed this disturbing information away as further evidence for his case. They passed through the cultural exhibition areas, where dancers performed traditional movements, musicians played instruments that ranged from soothingly melodic to painfully percussive, and artists demonstrated techniques from delicate calligraphy to metal forging, another process involving alarming temperatures. Finally, they arrived at the science pavilion. Unlike the chaotic sensory assault of the cultural areas, this section was organized with precision. Displays showcased Earth's technological achievements, from primitive tools to their surprisingly advanced space propulsion systems. For all their culinary insanity, humans had developed interstellar capability remarkably quickly. At the center of the pavilion, Trari spotted the rest of the team. The sight of familiar species was an immense relief after the overwhelming humanness of everything around him. The lead scientist, Dr. Morix, was a furred mammalian from Canathos. Standing slightly taller than the average human, his body was covered in short, dense golden fur, with a distinctive darker pattern running down his spine. His face featured forward-facing eyes, a fellow predator species that had evolved convergently with humans, though Canithians had long since evolved past their meat-eating origins. His pointed ears swiveled alertly, catching sounds from around the pavilion with accuracy humans could only dream of.
"Ah, our sensitive xenobiologist returns,"
Dr. Morix said upon noticing Trari's approach, his sharp teeth visible in what might have been a smile or a grimace.
"Recovered from your episode?"
Beside Dr. Morix stood the team's physicist, Zalara, a cryolan whose transparent body glimmered with the reflected light. Her roughly humanoid form was composed of translucent structures that refracted the pavilion's lighting into rainbow patterns on nearby surfaces. She acknowledged Trari with a subtle change in her luminescence, a greeting in cryolan body language. The fourth member of their team, botanist Plucked, was a mycelium, a fungoid species whose body consisted of a central stalk supporting a broad, umbrella-like cap dotted with sensory nodules. The mycelium's outer membrane rippled in what Trari recognized as amusement. Each scientist was accompanied by their own human guide, standing respectfully nearby, though none appeared as comfortable with their charges as Lucas was with Trari.
"I'm fully recovered, thank you,"
Trari said stiffly, drawing himself up to his full height, which was still the shortest of the group.
"And I have made some disturbing observations about our hosts."
Dr. Morix tilted his head.
"Oh, do share, junior scientist."
Trari bristled at the diminutive title, but pressed on.
"Humans deliberately consume substances they know to be toxic. They cook using open flame. They seem to derive pleasure from engaging in potentially lethal activities. By any rational galactic standard, they are dangerously unstable."
The lead scientist exchanged glances with the others, and Trari had the distinct impression they were silently laughing at him.
"Young Trari,"
Dr. Morix said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone Trari had come to despise.
All species have their quirks. The human's risk tolerance is precisely what has allowed them to advance so quickly. It's actually quite fascinating from an evolutionary perspective.
Quacks?
Trari repeated incredulously.
They eat poison for entertainment.
Plucked sensory nodules contacted.
Many species consume compounds that might be toxic in large quantities. My own kind regularly absorbs minerals that would be poisonous to you, Izark.
That's different,
Trari insisted.
You evolved to process those minerals. Humans consume it explicitly knowing these substances could kill them, and they consume it anyway.
Zalara's form chimed softly, her species' equivalent of a thoughtful grim.
Their biology is highly adaptable. They can neutralize or tolerate substances that would be fatal to us. It's part of why we selected them for contact, despite their use as a spacefaring civilization.
Trari looked around at his colleagues in disbelief. How could these esteemed scientists be so dismissive of such clearly aberrant behavior? Unless...
You haven't actually seen what they eat, have you?
Trari realized.
You've been too busy with the technology exchanges to visit the culinary pavilions.
Dr. Morrix's ear tensed, a tell that Trari had hit upon the truth.
I propose a challenge,
Trari said, suddenly inspired.
Let me take you all to view the human food exhibitions. If, after seeing what they voluntarily consume, you still believe they are a stable, rational species, I will resign my objections and officially note it in our report that I was, as you put it, too soft.
The scientists exchanged glances again.
And if we agree with your assessment?
Dr. Morrix asked, a note of curiosity in his voice.
Then I acknowledge in our official report that I was correct to be concerned, and we recommend additional psychological evaluation before proceeding with further cultural exchanges.
Trari said firmly. Dr. Morrix's whiskers twitched in amusement.
Very well. Lead this expedition to the, what did you call it, Lucas? The food courts?
Lucas, who had been watching this exchange with signs of being entertained, nodded. That's right, and I should warn you all, Earth has thousands of cuisines. What you'll see is just a tiny sampling.
All the better,
Trari said, newfound confidence surging through him.
It will only take a few examples to prove my point. You'll see that I'm not a soft herbivore. I'm simply the only one here with enough sense to recognize danger when I see it.
As they prepared to depart for the culinary pavilions, Trari felt a mixture of vindication and dread. He was certain the other scientists would be as horrified as he was once they saw the full extent of human dietary madness. At the same time, he wasn't looking forward to experiencing the madness again for himself. Lucas leaned down to murmur in Trari's ear, "Just wait until they see the exotic beverages display." Trari didn't know what those were, but something in Lucas's tone sent a shiver down his spine. The group made their way through the bustling exchange venue toward the culinary pavilions. Trari led the procession with a determined stride, while Lucas walked alongside, occasionally offering explanations about the passing exhibits. Dr. Morrix, Zalara, and Plucked followed behind with their respective human guides, their body language betraying varying degrees of skepticism. The Japanese culinary exhibit stood elegantly designed with red and white decorations. A stylized gate marked the entrance, and inside, human attendants in traditional garments moved gracefully between displays of artfully arranged food. Japan has one of Earth's most distinctive food cultures, Lucas explained to the group. It's an island nation, so seafood features prominently in their cuisine.
Perfect,
Trari muttered under his breath. If he remembered the book correctly, seafood was precisely where he wanted to begin his demonstration of human culinary insanity. They approached a display where a human chef was expertly slicing a peculiar-looking creature with multiple arms. The knife moved in quick bursts, transforming the strange creature into paper-thin, translucent slices arranged in an artful pattern. Dr. Morrix's ears swiveled forward as he observed the process.
"What is that creature?"
"Octopus," Lucas replied, "an aquatic species with 8 tentacles. Quite delicious, especially prepared as sashimi. That means raw." Trari turned to face his colleagues, gesturing emphatically towards the display.
Look at this monstrosity. 8 writhing appendages, a beak-like mouth, and it excretes ink when threatened. And humans are putting this into their mouths?
Zalara's transparent form flickered with subtle color changes, the equivalent of a grimace in her species' body language.
The texture appears disturbing.
"The raw flesh is still translucent," Plunked observed, his sensory nodules contracting in what appeared to be disgust. "One can still see the cellular structure." Lucas seemed confused by their reaction. "It's considered a delicacy. The texture is unique, slightly chewy but tender."
Chewy but tender?
Trari repeated with horror.
Do you hear yourselves? You're describing the mouth-feel of a creature that looks like it crawled out of a deep space nightmare.
Lucas reluctantly led them to another station where long, snake-like fish were being grilled over an open flame. The pungent aroma made Trari's sensitive nasal membranes contract. "Unagi," Lucas explained, gesturing toward the grilling eels. "Freshwater eel. It's typically filleted, dipped in a sweet sauce, and grilled."
So you take creatures that resemble water serpents, creatures that any sensible species would avoid on instinct, and deliberately consume them?
Trari asked incredulously. Dr. Morrix tilted his head, his golden fur rippling slightly with what might have been discomfort.
"The human palate is adventurous."
But the true masterpiece of human food insanity,
Trari continued, building to his crescendo,
is something so common that humans don't even consider it unusual.
He turned to Lucas.
Please explain to my colleagues what cheese is.
Lucas blinked, caught off guard by this change in direction. "Cheese? It's a dairy product made from milk."
And how exactly is it made?
Trari pressed. "Well, milk is extracted from herbivorous mammals, usually cows, goats, or sheep. Then it's treated with enzymes and bacteria that cause it to curdle and ferment over time. The solids are separated from the liquids, then pressed and, aged."
Stop right there.
Trari interrupted, walking toward another exhibit.
Let me rephrase what you just described. Humans forcibly extract nutritional fluids intended for the offspring of another species. Then they deliberately introduce bacteria and enzymes to spoil this fluid, causing it to curdle and separate. This partially rotted substance is then compressed and left to age, sometimes for years, becoming increasingly pungent and colonized by various molds and microorganisms. And then humans eagerly consume this decomposed mammary secretion.
Put in those terms, even Lucas looked momentarily disconcerted. The reaction among the Galactic scientists was more pronounced. Dr. Morrix's golden fur stood on end, Zalara's transparent body had dimmed significantly, a sign of distress in her species. Plunked's cap had contracted, closing protectively over their sensory nodules. "When you describe it that way," Lucas began, his voice trailing off.
Is there another way to describe it?
Trari asked innocently.
Am I mistaken in any particular way?
"No, but—"
And some varieties of this cheese contain live insect larvae, correct? Maggots that are still moving when the cheese is consumed?
At this point, Plucked emitted a soft whistling sound, their species' equivalent of a gag reflex. His cap pulsated rapidly, the usually smooth surface becoming wrinkled and distressed. That's just one type, a Kasumazu from Sardinia," Lucas protested. "It's considered extreme even by human standards."
Yet it exists,
Trari said triumphantly.
along with cheeses deliberately cultivated with specific molds, cheeses washed in alcoholic beverages to promote bacterial growth, and cheese so pungent they literally banned from public transport in some regions.
Dr. Morix cleared his throat, his fur gradually settling back into place.
Trari makes some valid observations. However, food fermentation is not unique to Earth. Many galactic cultures use controlled decomposition processes to enhance nutrients or flavors.
Trari felt his moment slipping. He needed to press his advantage.
Let's continue to the spice exhibits, shall we? I believe they will further illustrate my point.
The group moved to another section of the culinary pavilions, where colourful displays showcased Earth's diverse array of spices and herbs. The air was heavy with complex aromas that made Trari's sensitive chemoreceptors tingle uncomfortably. Spices, Lucas explained, having regained some of his composure, are plant parts used to flavour food, seeds, fruit, rocks, bark, all carefully selected over thousands of years to enhance human cuisine. Trari approached a display of small, wrinkled red pods.
And what are these?
Chili peppers, Lucas said. They contain a compound called capsaicin that creates a burning sensation when consumed.
A burning sensation,
Trari repeated, turning to his colleagues.
These plants evolved this compound specifically as a defense mechanism to prevent consumption, and humans not only ignore this deterrent, but actively seek out increasingly potent varieties for pleasure.
Dr. Morix sniffed cautiously at the display, his sensitive nose twitching at the volatile compounds.
Many species develop resistance to plant defensive compounds. That's basic coevolution.
But most species don't deliberately seek out pain for entertainment,
Trari countered.
Humans literally compete to see who can endure the most suffering from these toxins. They have numerical scales to measure the intensity of pain these substances cause.
Lucas nodded. The Scoville scale. Zalara's form glimmered with a contemplative pattern of light.
Fascinating. These humans seek controlled danger as a form of stimulation. It's not dissimilar to the cryolan practice of fluid bathing.
Trari felt his argument weakening again. He gestured toward another display where various roots and tubers were exhibited.
What about these plants that are toxic in their natural state? Humans only render them edible through elaborate processing.
It's true. Like cassava, Lucas explained. It contains cyanide compounds in its raw state, but proper preparation removes the toxins.
That supports my point,
Trari insisted.
What kind of species deliberately incorporates as many potentially lethal substances into their diet?
Plucked's sensory nodules extended slightly from his cap.
Actually, many toxic compounds in special doses provide hermetic benefits, simulating adaptive responses in biological systems. Perhaps humans evolved to seek such compounds from their beneficial stress effects.
Trari felt his case slipping away. His colleagues were finding rational explanations for what he saw as clearly irrational behavior. He needed something more dramatic.
Lucas,
he said suddenly,
you mentioned an exotic beverages display earlier. I believe that would provide clear evidence for my colleagues.
Lucas hesitated, a flicker of concern crossing his features. Well, sure. It's on the other side of the venue. Follow me. As they walked, Trari whispered urgently to Lucas.
What exactly is in this exhibit? Something sufficiently alarming, I hope?
Lucas gave him an odd look. Oh, there's plenty that might surprise your colleagues, though I'm beginning to wonder if this tour is really the best idea. The beverage pavilion was arranged in sections representing different types of drinks from around the world. Lucas first led them to a display of various alcoholic beverages, bottles of amber, clear, and dark liquids arranged on illuminated shelves. These, Lucas explained, are fermented or distilled drinks containing ethanol, what humans call alcohol. They're consumed recreationally across most human cultures.
Ethanol?
Trari seized on the word.
Isn't that a neurotoxin and cellular poison, the same compound humans use as a fuel and industrial solvent?
Well, yes, Lucas admitted, but in moderate amounts.
It causes brain damage, liver damage, and addiction,
Trari pressed.
It impairs cognitive function, motor control, and judgment. And humans consume it voluntarily for pleasure?
Dr. Morix tilted his head, his ears perking up with interest rather than alarm.
Many species have discovered fermentation. The Canithians have several ceremonial beverages with mild psychoactive properties.
But do they drink them until they lose consciousness? Trari asked. Do they consume them in quantities that cause long-term organ damage and death?
The scientists exchanged uncomfortable glances, but Trari could tell that alcohol alone wasn't going to win his argument. It was too familiar a concept across galactic cultures, even if humans took it to extremes. Let's move on, Lucas suggested, leading them deeper into the exhibit. Instead of finding safer ground, he inadvertently brought them to a section that made even Trari stop short in shock. Behind glass display cases were bottles containing various liquids, with entire animals preserved inside them. Snakes coiled as if frozen in attack, scorpions with stingers raised, and various unidentifiable creatures floating in amber fluid.
"What is this?"
Dr. Morix asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His golden fur had begun to pale, taking on an ashen hue that spread from his muzzle down his neck. Lucas winced visibly. Snake wine. It's a traditional medicinal alcoholic beverage in some parts of Asia. A venomous snake is placed in rice wine and allowed to steep, sometimes with other creatures or herbs added for additional, therapeutic properties.
You put venomous predators in poison and then drink it?
Zalara's form had gone nearly transparent with shock, light barely touching her now. The alcohol denatures the venom, Lucas explained weakly. Mostly.
Mostly?
Trari repeated, watching as Dr. Morix swayed slightly on his feet. The lead scientist's ears were pinned flat against his skull, and his normally commanding presence had diminished considerably.
I think I've seen enough,
Dr. Morix said, his voice uncharacteristically faint.
Lucas, I appreciate the educational tour, but I believe I should return to the ship for, data compilation.
Pluck's cap had completely closed over their sensory nodules, a defensive posture rarely seen outside of extreme environmental threats. I will accompany you, Dr. Morix. I find I must, recalibrate my sensory apparatus after these experiences. Zalara's light had dimmed to a barely perceptible glow.
I, too, should process what we have observed. The humans have certainly demonstrated unexpected cultural elements.
Within moments, all three scientists had made polite but hasty excuses to their human guides and were retreating towards the exit, their movements betraying an urgency that diplomatic protocol hardly contained. Trari was left alone with Lucas, surrounded by the strange preserved creatures in their alcoholic tombs. The victory felt hollow as Trari watched his colleagues practically fleeing from the human cultural exchange. He had wanted to prove a point, not cause a potential diplomatic incident. Lucas's expression had fallen, the enthusiasm that had animated his features throughout the day now replaced with quiet disappointment. Well, he said softly, I guess not everyone is ready for the full Earth experience. Trari felt an unexpected twinge of remorse. He had succeeded too well. His colleagues hadn't merely acknowledged his point, they had been genuinely disturbed by human practices. And, in the process, he had made Lucas feel that his species was somehow deficient or repulsive.
Lucas,
Trari began, unsure how to proceed.
I may have overemphasized certain aspects of human cuisine.
Lucas shrugged. You only stated facts, even if you presented them in the least flattering way possible. I guess when you put it all together like that, we do seem a bit extreme.
Perhaps that extremeness is exactly what allowed humans to survive and advance,
Trari offered, surprised to find himself defending the very behaviors he had just condemned.
Your willingness to experiment, to push boundaries, even with something as fundamental as food, speaks to an ability that few species possess.
That's a generous interpretation, Lucas said with a small smile, but I think your colleagues would prefer a more conventional dinner tonight.
A wise precaution,
Trari agreed. Will you be joining them? Lucas asked. Trari hesitated.
I should compile my observations for the official report, if you'll excuse me.
Lucas nodded, and Trari made his way to a quiet corner of the venue, finding a small table, partially hidden, close to a decorative plant. He activated his datapad and began to record his thoughts.
Official observation report. Junior xenobiologist Trari of the Hyzak Science Academy. Subject, human culinary practices and their implications for interspecies relations.
He paused, organizing his thoughts before continuing.
While initial observations suggest that human food preparation and consumption habits are objectively unusual by galactic standards, often incorporating substances that are toxic, employing preparation methods that involve significant risk, and displaying an apparent disregard for conventional food safety parameters, it would be erroneous to conclude that these behaviors indicate broader psychological instability or unsuitability for galactic partnership.
Trari glanced across the venue, where Lucas was now speaking with another human, gesturing animatedly despite the earlier setback.
Rather, these practices appear to demonstrate the remarkable food variety that has allowed humans to survive in their challenging planetary environment. Their willingness to convert potential threats into resources, to derive pleasure from risk, and to transform necessity into art speaks to a creativity that may prove valuable in addressing novel galactic challenges.
He hesitated before adding a personal note.
It is the recommendation of this researcher that future cultural exchanges with humans should perhaps minimize culinary sharing until proper contextual understanding has been established. When introducing humans to new species, it may be advisable to avoid the topic of food altogether, at least initially.
Trari deactivated the datapad and looked up to see Lucas approaching with a small plate. I thought you might be hungry, Lucas said, offering what appeared to be a simple arrangement of colorful plant matter. Just fruits and vegetables, nothing fermented, toxin-laden, or formerly alive and crawling with tentacles. Promise. Trari accepted the plate with a grateful gesture.
Thank you, Lucas, and I apologize if my demonstration caused distress.
Lucas sat down across from him. No offense taken. Actually, looking at our food through alien eyes was pretty enlightening. We humans take a lot for granted about what's normal. Maybe next time you can show me what Hyzak cuisine is like. I promise not to faint.
I would like that,
Trari said, carefully selecting a piece of red fruit from the plate.
Though I warn you, by human standards, our food is remarkably boring. No toxins, no danger, no 8-armed monsters, just simple nutrients.
Sounds wonderfully relaxing, Lucas laughed. Sometimes boring is exactly what you need. As Trari cautiously bit into the earth fruit, finding its sweetness surprisingly pleasant, he reflected that perhaps there was wisdom in the human's approach after all. Life contained inherent risks. Humans simply acknowledged this reality and found ways to control, celebrate, and even enjoy the dangerous aspects of existence rather than avoiding them entirely. It was a perspective worth considering, though Trari had absolutely no intention of trying snake wine anytime soon.